Hello, and in this video we will be sharing with you a trap that even Alireza Peyruja fall for. But before doing so, it's essential for you to know the 6 main traps in the English opening that even grandmasters fall for. So the English opening starts after c4, e5, knight to c3, knight to c6, and going for knight to f3, the 3 knights opening, and now black goes for g6. Now black is trying to fianchetto his bishop into g7, and now white goes for d4. A normal move here for black is to capture the pawn, which after knight takes d4 and bishop to g7, black is having a comfortable position. This is a slow opening that white could go for, but we don't want slow openings, we want aggression openings. This is why white goes for knight to d5, immediately putting his knight in the center, trying to attack on the black position with this knight. So black continues normally with bishop to g7, and now comes bishop to g5. Now, the main move here for black is to play knight c to e7, but it's not that common. Black here usually, if he goes for f6, now this is a strategical weakness. So after bishop f move like bishop to f4, hitting the pawn on c7 with the knight, d6 to block this diagonal. And right now, yeah, after a move like knight takes d4, knight takes d4, and queen takes d4, white should be having a very good position here with a slight positional advantage early on from the game. So let's come back to bishop to g5 and see what are the options for black. Now here, a top grandmaster played this move, knight g to e7, falling into white's trap, and which is to take this pawn on d4. It may seem like a crazy move because it's defended twice with the knight and with the bishop, but here's the catch. If knight takes d4, then this allows bishop takes e7, trapping the black queen and winning the game in only 7 moves. And the other variation is that, wait a minute, I won't take with my knight, I will take with the bishop, and here's the catch. Here we played a brilliant move, queen takes d4, sacrificing our queen. So what's the idea? What if black just take the queen? So now comes knight to f6 check, followed up with bishop to h6, finishing the game in style with a bishop checkmate with the queen sacrifice in just a 10 moves win. So the next one we have here is after c4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and pawn to d5, going for the Grünfeld opening. So c takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and now pawn g3 from the white pieces, g6 from the black side, and now bishop to g2, knight takes c3, b takes c3, and bishop to g7. This is the main Grünfeld opening for the black pieces against the English opening. So now comes rook b1, attacking the pawn on b7 with the rook and with the bishop here from g2. So black castles short, and now there is a trap here that black could trap white into capturing this pawn with the bishop, allowing bishop takes b7, and after rook takes b7, at the end of the day here, this queen to d5, forking off this rook on b7 and the rook on h1, both at the same move, and white will be forced to give up an exchange here. Rook takes b8, and whatever rook takes back, he will block his queen and he will be down an exchange, and with it black will be winning very easily. So let's go back and see how it went wrong for white. Here, after black castles short and thinking that he is outsmarting white into taking the pawn on b7, here you do not take with your bishop, but instead you take with your rook. This is why if black captures your rook, you just take back with your bishop, trapping this rook on the corner here. And after a move like knight to d7, you just take the rook, and after queen takes bishop, you just develop your knight, cutting off this queen attack on the rook, and after that you just castle and you're up a pawn, and with it you are simply winning. So let's go back again and see c4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and we get this line from black. So now e4 is the main move, and now d5, e5, d4, you take the knight on f6, they take your knight on c3, b takes c3, queen takes f6, and the main move here is pawn to d4, getting into the mechanics variation of the English opening. So the main move here is pawn d6, trying to develop this bishop in this long diagonal, and now you go for just knight to f3, bishop to b7, and now bishop to d3, preparing such a sneaky trap with bishop to g5. Now here, there are two main moves. They are pawn h6 and there is bishop takes f3, relying on trying to double your pawns here on f3. But you know, there is also a common trap here that even 7 grandmasters fall into, which is to play knight to d7. Now, they are thinking is if white goes for bishop to g5, we've got bishop to f3, which after if white just takes back, he loses his bishop that came into g5. And if you take back with the queen also, there is just queen takes f3, g takes f3, and you are not having the best pawn structure in the world, and black is doing very, very well. So let's come back, but instead here, after bishop takes f3, you do not capture back, but you just protect your bishop on g5, and guess what? The black queen is trapped, cannot go to g6 thanks for this bishop, and this bishop is currently attacking it. So, you know, a normal variation would be bishop takes g2 to hit the rook, but right now we just take the queen, allowing black to take the rook, and then we just retreat with our bishop back to h4, for example, bishop to d6, and you just know how to win this. You are up a queen, and you should be easily winning. A move like queen to e3 is very good here, trying to go for moves like d5, and you know, after a move like castle, you could go for f3 and just go after this bishop with king to f2 and trying to capture this bishop with the other rook. So let's go into our fourth trap here. After c4, we get knight to f6, knight to c3, e6 again, the mechanism variation, e4, and now there is a variation. Instead of d5 is to play c5 from the black side, trying to prevent this d4 move, and this move is actually forcing white to sacrifice pawn after e5, hitting the knight. Knight is forced to go back to g8, and now knight to f3, knight to c6, and now pawn to d4 from the white. C takes d4, knight takes d4, and now knight takes e5, and now knight d to b5. Now, this knight is really annoying. It's trying to jump into the black position. So yes, we sacrifice the pawn, but we are trying to get our knight into d6, potentially to win this dark square bishop. So we get a dark square dominance here on the middle of the board. So most players or most Sicilian players will just play the typical move, pawn to d6 to prevent you from going there. But now you see this pawn on d6 is trying to stop this knight, but we just go for c5. We are trying to undermine this pawn in order for us to go to d6 still. So you may wonder, wait a minute, what's going on? Can't just black take the pawn and it's just a free pawn? Well, yeah, it's a free pawn, but then we will win a free rook. So here after bishop to f4 hitting the knight, so the knight would be forced to retreat, I don't know, like knight c6, but any knight retreat, there will be knight to c7 check, forking the king and winning the rook. And so let's go back again and see what if black goes for a move like f6 here. Then bishop takes e5, f takes e5, and now queen to h5 is coming. And this is getting very, very bad for black here because after pawn g6, queen takes e5, hitting the rook. Only defense for the rook is to play a move like knight to f6, but then rook to d1 comes with knight to c7 following up, and also queen to f6 here. Is the same after knight to c7 check, king to d8, queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and then knight takes a8, and therefore white will be up a rook, and he should be easily winning the game with it. So let's get into our fifth one, and I believe it's the simplest one, but I put it there because most of floor-rated player will get it as well. It comes after pawn c4, the English opening, and we get the Scandinavian defense from black. And now we just take the pawn, and you know, queen takes d5 is met with knight to c3, followed up with d4 and e4, and white is having a really strong center. So black may go knight to f6, trying to recapture their pawn back, but now we can protect this pawn with pawn to e4, protecting our pawn on d5. Thanks for this tactic. After knight e4, queen to a4 is check, collect the knight, and win the game very easily on. I'm sure this is the simplest one, but I believe most of lower rated players will get this very often. So let's get into our sixth main trap in the English opening that comes after c4, e5, knight to c3, knight to f6, knight to f3, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now pawn to g3 from the white pieces, bishop to b4. This is the main opening in the 4 knights English opening, and now bishop to b4 is met with knight to d5. Again, Such an aggressive move, questioning this bishop. What are you doing here on b4? So first off, you may wonder what happens if this knight takes our knight. Then c takes d5, attacks this knight and puts pressure on this pawn on e5. So right now if this knight moves, then, potentially you could win this pawn on e5. So most of the black players think that, wait a minute, okay, if you're attacking my knight, I'll attack yours. If you go d5, attacking my knight on c6, I'll go e4, attacking your knight on f3, and it's all good, right? Unless here, after you take the knight, they take the knight. Now here you play queen to b3, and now attacking this bishop. And yes, you may think that we are still on move 8 and the game has just started. Yeah, this is winning for white, and black should resign here because his bishop is attacked, and when the bishop moves backwards, then c takes on b7, forks the rook and forks the bishop, and will make a white winning a bishop. The other one here is instead of this, they may play knight to e7, and allow you to take on e5. So knight takes e5, knight takes d5, and it's just a trade of pawns. But yet again we played the same move, queen to b3. You see, same pattern repeats itself again and again. So if this knight moves away, then this bishop is lost. So this is why black needs to protect his knight on d5 with pawn c6. But now comes bishop to g2, attacking this knight one more time and trying to capture the knight, and then after it capture the bishop. So black may think that they need to protect the bishop with a move like queen to a5 to protect the bishop. So when you take their knight, they will just capture back with the pawn, and the queen protects the bishop. Should be good, right? What's going on? But now you just go for pawn e4 and attack the knight on d5. And, when this knight moves away, like let's say knight to f6, then now comes queen takes f7, thanks for this knight protecting it. And after king d8, queen takes g7, and white is pretty much winning the game on the spot. So let's come back, and also here, after e4, black may think that, okay, wait a minute, if I move my knight, they will capture on f7, so let me castle. So if they take on d5, I get to play rook to e8, hitting their knight, and the pawn on d4 and d2 is pinned. And if they play a move like f4, for example, then I get to play pawn d6 and recapture back my piece. So yeah, that works if you are not playing good. But if you just played knight c4, attacking the queen, counter-attacking the queen, and the queen is forced to move to go to something like b5, now you can simply capture the knight, allow c takes d5, and get your knight back to e3. You should be very good here, and you should just be winning on the spot. So let's come to our 7th trap in the English opening, and this one Fabiano Caruana played against Alireza Fairuja, and Alireza Fairuja fell for. So Fabiano starts with c4, we get c6 from Fairuja, knight to f3, and now pawn to d5 from Alireza, immediately counter-attacking the center. Fabiano here played pawn to g3, preparing to get his bishop out to g2. So we get bishop to g4 from Fairuja, and now we get knight to e5 from Fabiano, counter-attacking this bishop on g4, bishop to f5. So black's idea is that, yeah, he gets his bishop out to g4 and then f5, but this knight also is wasted a move, and it's not having the best possible placement here on e5. So we get queen to b3 from Fabiano, immediately going for the pawn on b7. So we get queen to b6 from Fairuja, defending his pawn, offering the queen exchange, and now Fabiano just took on d5, allowing Fairuja to capture his queen, and after that he just captures back with his pawn. Now the normal move here for black would be c takes d5, and should be good for them after knight to c3, hitting the pawn, pawn to e6, for example, to defend. Knight to b5 should be troubles here on the square on d7, thanks for this knight not allowing your king to go back. So this is why after knight c3 you are forced to play a move like f6, but yet again knight takes d5 is good here. After knight c7 you win the exchange, and with it you are winning the game. So this is why Fairuja refused to capture with this pawn, and he played bishop to e4, attacking this rook on h1 and attacking this pawn. And you may think that, okay, like if the rook moves, then black just takes back, and if f3 also, then black just takes back on d5, and hit the pawn on b3. And white should be having the advantage here after a move like pawn to d4 followed up with pawn to e4. This pawn is not being that easy to capture thanks to bishop to h3, and with it you are accessing the d7, you are preventing this knight from the development, and also this rook is tied down to defend this pawn on a7, so it should be good for white, right? Yeah, at if white goes for. But here, white, or let me say Fabiano, ignored the fact that this rook is attacked and just captures the pawn on c6. And Fairuza thought here for a minute and a half and took the rook. He was relying on that if Caruana takes the pawn on b7, then he may just capture back. And if anything, then yeah, I just want a rook. So it doesn't really matter. If pawn c7 also, then knight c6 now, and this rook is covering the promotion square. So what is the catch? Did Fabiano blunder his rook, or what happened after he took the pawn on c6? Now, after Fairuza took the rook, here Fabiano played the brilliant move rook takes a7, now forcing the rook to go out. And believe it or not, there is a back rank checkmate thanks for this knight on e5 covering the d7 square. So if you, for example, try to ignore the rook takes a8, knight to d8, then this is so bad after something like this, and you win the other rook also. So this is very bad here for black. And what else that black could do? Black cannot do anything after rook takes a7. This is why it's a brilliant move. Now, in the game, black took the rook, and now white goes for c7. Now, attacking the knight and threatening the promotion. You cannot do anything about it here except for to resign, which Alireza did here, because if the knight goes to c6, then you just promote, and after that you just go for queen to d7, which is checkmate and will give you such a great victory with only 9 moves in the opening, just like Fabiano did. Thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure to check the latest video here, and goodbye.